they ended up being right about a lot of things. And it's unfortunate. It's not always that situation, but I do think that we are headed towards a world where we're understanding the more power that you give to governments, the more that they encroach on personal freedoms, individual liberties, etc. And the most extreme examples everyone can identify, and I think generally in the developed world, we point our finger and shake it and say, they shouldn't do that, right? But when you look here in the US, it's always that could never happen here. And I don't think that there's people who fundamentally believe that it's going to happen tomorrow, because it's usually this like slow degradation of freedom. But if all of a sudden they shut people down from Stripe, okay. Well, there was just a guy who was in politics who Chase Bank shut down his account for reputation risk. This isn't somebody who was, out saying crazy conspiracy theories, whatever. Definitely politically controversial, whatever. But I think if you and I had to sit down and make a list of all the people who get, financially censored or censored off social media, it's usually kind of the fringes of society, right? It's the people who, if I went home and I talked to my mom, she'd be like, that person's a little crazy, right? These are people who are just involved in politics. And so I think that at some point you have to start to ask yourself, do I want to risk even being exposed to a system where it could happen? It's not saying it's going to happen. It's not saying I have some prediction as to when it happens. It's just, why even subject yourself to that risk? And I think it goes back to this conversation around the best investors in the world, for the most part, are actually not very risk tolerant. They don't want to go and take immense risk. Almost never will you see one of the best investors in the world say, I'm going to take 100% of all of my investable assets and I'm putting it on this one stock, cross my fingers and hope it works, right? That just doesn't happen. Instead, they think a lot about risk mitigation. They try to figure out what are the ways that I can basically make investment decisions where there's lots of upside and there's very little downside. And so I think that as a society, we're learning now that's probably the pretty good way to think, right? It's a pretty good way to kind of position your life. And so if you're a content creator, don't go all in on only one platform. Why? You have platform risk, right? Build 2 or 3 different platforms. If you're a citizen with your financial life, don't go all in on one bank or don't go all in on one type of asset. Have some sort of durability to it. And so in the US, I don't think we worry so much about censorship. But in some crazy way, what is a sanction? The United States government runs around the world sanctioning countries. And they have reasons for doing it. In some cases, I think people would agree with them. In some cases, people won't agree with them. I'm not here to debate, should we do it, should we not? But the word sanction ends up being a marketing term. Right? Censorship would sound a lot worse. Hey, we're going to censor this country. There's a comedian, and I wish I could remember who it is. I want to say it's Chris Rock, has a whole segment around the Iraq and Afghanistan war. And he said the word insurgent was the greatest creation ever. He goes, I don't know any insurgents. Do you? No? All right. Kill them all. Right? He goes, but if we'd said, hey, we're fighting humans. Also, whoa, hold on a second. What did they do? Are they good people? Are they bad? There'd be questions, or you would think differently about it. But when you use a terminology that is somewhat clinical in nature and isn't something that's part of the everyday vernacular, you just think differently about it, right? And it's just human nature. And so I think that sanctions is another one that kind of falls in that of, oh, yeah, we're sanctioning these bad people. Sanction them, right? Like what? Right. We're censoring people. Well, who are you censoring? Oh, we're cutting off an entire country's access to the global financial system. All of them? Or just the bad people, right? The everyday citizen, they get cut off too? Oh, well, maybe they don't get cut off, but maybe there's negative ramifications for them. A lot of nuance in the world, right? And so I think that ultimately we're moving more towards a world where anybody can use this payment system, which at first sounds a little scary to people because that means that the bad people will use it too. But who's the good person and who's the bad person? Well, who gets to decide? And I don't think anyone wants to encourage terrorist financing, money laundering, criminal behavior, or any of that stuff. But the one benefit that this payment system has on top of sovereignty and censorship resistant is that it's done on a public ledger. It would be like criminals basically saying, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go and we're going to do crimes. And then we're going to literally write down every transaction we have. And then we're going to put it on a website on the internet. And anyone can come look at it. A lot of criminals say, I probably don't want to do that, right? I actually want to use that bag of cash that no one knows about, and I'm going to use physical dollars to facilitate this.
Are there stats around how much sort of nefarious stuff is going on with Bitcoin versus US dollar?
So the stats that I know off the top of my head is over $2 trillion of fiat currency are just money laundering every year, used for illicit purposes.
Oh.
Which is about the size of the entire crypto industry, not just Bitcoin, but the entire crypto industry, right? So it's a very big number. Some of that is simple things like terrorist financing, and then you're literally bringing a bag of cash or whatever. But a lot of it also is major banks who end up being caught up in money laundering situations, et cetera. And I'm always careful. I think it's very easy to kind of point your finger at banks and say, these are all bad people, whatever. I tend to think of it more as folks with good intentions. They're trying to do the best that they can. Are there situations where they definitely know they're doing it? Of course. But if you had to monitor millions of transactions a day going through your bank, they do a better job than I would.
For sure.
Right. So there's again nuance there. So that's the fiat system. And then in the Bitcoin world, so not all crypto, but in Bitcoin specifically, the latest stats that I've seen is there's a report out that says 0.4%, so less than 0.5% of all transactions are used for illicit or nefarious purposes. And then there was also a former CIA director who came out and basically published a whole report. I don't remember what exact number he came up with, but it's pretty much in line, definitely less than 1%. And so if you talk to law enforcement, they say all the time, they're like, if somebody commits a crime, we want their fingers on a keyboard. Why? There's a digital trail. It's much easier to track them. It's much easier to figure this stuff out. And so I think what we've seen is just criminals in the early days of 2009, 10, 11, 12, even maybe 13, 14. Oh, there's a pseudonymous currency that no one knows about. Like, I'm going to go do all this crazy stuff with it. Well, now that we're in 2021, people realize, oh, wait a minute, I just used this public, ledger. That probably wasn't the smartest idea. But I think that it's important, actually, that the criminals and bad actors adopted it first, because that is the adoption cycle that every great technology takes, whether it's mobile phones, beepers, the internet, etc. There's a constant cat and mouse game between law enforcement and bad actors. And so what are bad actors constantly doing? They're looking for new innovative ways to use technology to get away from or obscure law enforcement from catching them. And so criminals are actually usually the first adopters of new technology, which again doesn't make people feel good, but if you go back and you look, it's a historical pattern. And so the fact that they were first, and then we got kind of the first adopters from a technology standpoint, and then we started to get more of the mainstream, and now it's estimated that more than 100 million people globally use this stuff. It's kind of like goes back to your...
Is that high already?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Wow.
Coinbase alone, I think they report now that they've got, if I remember the number correctly, it's like 58 million registered users. Just one company, and they're not even the biggest exchange, right? In the month of July, 1.2 million new users came onto the Bitcoin blockchain. So not Coinbase, not any exchange or wallet, the actual blockchain itself. You can see on-chain new entities. And 1.2 million new entities came online, which is the fastest it's ever grown in a single month. And so what you have is you have a fixed supply asset that now you've got the most number of entities ever joining in a month. Of course the price goes up, right? Fixed supply asset demand goes up. Unless you think that supply demand economics are invalidated, the price has to move to accommodate everyone. And so it's just a fascinating asset that I think ultimately those that embrace it early will end up benefiting from. And a lot of times as I kind of go down this path, talking about the criminal behavior and you talk about the public ledger, you talk about the adoption, people get uneasy. They don't like change, right? Humans hate change. But just like the internet, right? Imagine if we had sat here in the United States and we had said, this internet thing is kind of crazy. It's a decentralized, open thing. Anyone that has an internet connection can kind of join and participate and get information.
Anonymously.
Do all this stuff. You know what? I don't think the U.S. should participate. You know why? China. China's going to benefit. And North Korea is going to use the internet too. And Iran, those bad people, they're going to use the internet as well. So the U.S., we're going to sit this one out. Well, people did do that. North Korea did that, and North Korea would suck to live in, right? It's just they cut their people off from a very important technology. And so when you think about that from an open payment system, right? The idea of an open payment system is so foreign to us because of the system that we live in. But anyone in the world can plug into this open system and send value to anyone else without asking permission. If we sit here and we say, you know what, we shouldn't participate because there's some other country or some other organization that's going to also benefit from it, we're actually likely to be the ones that get hurt the most by those decisions. Instead, we should do what we do with the internet. Internet's going to be a thing. The United States is going to be the leader in the internet. We're going to benefit more than anybody else. And we're going to use this new technology to our benefit first.
What would that look like?
I think the easiest thing to start with is to use the payment rails. So Bitcoin as an asset, when people hear Bitcoin, there's a lot of confusion because the asset, the thing that you hold, the one of the 21 million units, think of that as like a dollar bill, right? In terms of it's a unit of currency. Bitcoin, the network, is the payment rails itself. So more of like a Visa. So I send dollars across Visa's network, right, in the legacy system. Here, what I do is I send Bitcoin across the Bitcoin network. So it gets a little confusing. The crypto community has never claimed to be great marketers, but great technologists. And so Bitcoin, the network, ends up allowing anyone to use it. So I'll give you a perfect example. I invested in a company called Strike. And what Strike allows you to do is send any currency to anyone else in the world completely for free, instantaneously, and they do it without going through any banks. Now that sounds like a utopia, right? How the hell do you do that? What it allows you to do is, let's say that I have dollars in my bank or in my account and you want euros. You live in Europe. I send $20 to you and my $20 ends up arriving to you, a $20 equivalent in euros, but happen instantaneously and nearly for free. How? What they're actually doing is they're taking the dollars, they're converting it to Bitcoin, they're sending the Bitcoin across the Lightning Network, and then they convert it back into euros. Now, the reason why that's so fascinating is if I now can send any currency, whether it's dollars, euros, Bitcoin, name your currency, across rails that allow for instantaneous settlement and near zero, if not zero, fees, all of a sudden, I don't have to send large amounts. Your bank wouldn't let you take $20 out of the bank, right? Or $19 because you needed 20. Well, I can't go wire somebody $5, right? If I went to the bank, I said, I want to send a wire to Tom in Europe for $5. I said, well, the minimum is whatever. You got to pay a $25, $30 fee, all this stuff. Okay. If I wanted to Venmo you, but you're not on Venmo, Venmo doesn't communicate with Revolut or SoFi or Cash App or name your payment system. It's a closed network. So now what ends up happening is Strike can say, hey, anyone with an account can send money to anyone else plugged into this system. Tom has Tom's Lightning app, right? And you start signing up users. People from Strike can send money to people on Tom's Lightning app. Why? It's because it's an open payment system. It's an open standard. And so now all of a sudden, you can also not only send to anyone through that censorship resistance component, but you also don't have to send large amounts. So now what I can do is I can send you a penny. I can send you 10 cents. I can send you 5 cents. I can send you $1 instantaneously and completely for free. And so when I do that, it unlocks all kinds of new use cases for payments on the internet, right? What if I don't want to buy, the easiest example is these like media subscriptions. I don't want to spend $30 a month for a media subscription, but I really want to read this one article. I'll pay 10 cents for it. And what if I can just simply do that automatically rather than have the $30 thing? They actually probably will make more money doing that than forcing people into the monthly subscription.
This is where the more you're in the NFT world, you begin to realize like the ultimate fantasy for anybody selling anything is to have you just connect your wallet. And then it's, especially if you still in your own mind sort of denominate in dollars, it's like, oh yeah, I've got these, Ethereum coins, whatever they are. And I can click this and it's only 0.04, whatever ETH. It's like, oh, that doesn't sound so bad. And you end up buying way more than you would. It is so effortless. The wanting to having is like so quick. And so to your point, the number of times I've gone to read an article and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Like even the thought of having to open an account and put in my credit card, no way. So even if I could get that article for 10 cents, knowing the sort of traditional hoops I'd have to go through. I'm not typing my name or any of that bullshit. But now with a MetaMask wallet, you go, literally, it prompts you connect. You hit connect, and then it's like, you want to buy this? Yes. 2 clicks and now you're reading the article for 10 cents. I mean, that I had never thought of that, but that would be, it will increase spending tenfold, 20-fold. Be crazy.
When we agreed that we were going to do this, I think it was going to be more of a conversation, but I'm going to pull you down the rabbit hole because I can tell you're intellectually interested in this stuff. I'll give you another use case that I think will have a profound economic impact globally. Historically, an employee gets paid every 2 weeks. In the 4 largest banks, this data comes from, I think, 2019. They made $8 billion in overdraft fees. So an overdraft means that they tried to debit your account and you didn't have any money in there.
Yeah.
So the 4 largest banks made $8 billion from people that didn't have any money. There's all kinds of ethical and questions and whatever. Part of the problem is when you start to unlock this and look into it is the folks at Bridge, another company I invested in, they went and did a whole deep dive. Why are these people, why don't they have money? What is it? It's usually not because they don't have money. It's because they get paid every 2 weeks. So I get paid on the 1st and the 15th. On the 10th, I went grocery shopping. My car payment's on the 11th. My Netflix hits on the 12th. Oh, I made a purchase on the 13th. Overdraft.
Yep.
If I get paid
you have
on the
no
15th,
real-time updates, by the way, so you don't even know where your account is. You think you're fine, like trying to track all the mental math or write it down, get out of here.
So when I get paid on the 15th, what do? I pay for the things that I need, and then I just have budgeted in an overdraft fee. And my $35 overdraft fee every month adds up, and so does all the other millions of Americans, and it ends up being $8 billion for the top 4 companies.
Oh my God.
Now, why can't we pay people at the end of every day? Why, when you leave work today, don't you get paid? Why does it only once, or twice a month? Well, it's a technology problem, right? And sure, there's economic reasons why the company wants to hold the money rather than give it to you and they earn interest or whatever, right? But it's mainly a technology problem because there's 2 components. One is, how do I actually pay you every day? What am I going to wire? Am I going to run payroll every day? Like, that's pretty crazy, right? That seems inefficient. And 2, how do I keep track of it? How do I do the accounting around, well, did Tom get paid? Did he actually get it? Yeah, okay, he got it. All right. Who didn't get paid today? Who didn't come into work? Okay, we don't pay them, whatever. So when you bring the cost of sending small amounts of money to zero and you do it in a frictionless, censorship-resistant way, you get what you call streaming payments. So kind of the most economic prosperity is now I can pay every one of my employees at the end of every day. Well, if I do that, how much better financial position are they going to be in? Just that alone would drastically lift millions of people around the world into a better financial position. Just pay people at the end of every day. And there's companies that are working on this. Some of them are using crypto rails. Some of them are trying to do other stuff, whatever. But that, when you drop the technology cost to zero to send money, is life-changing for folks.
This is why I want people to understand what's going on in cryptocurrency, what's going on in the blockchain in general. It is a technology. Money happens to be one of the things riding on the back of the technology. In fact, this is one of the things we have to talk about. I'll finish that point and then I want to get to that. Is, all right, this is a technology, which means I have opened, not me, of course, but the creators of which have opened up this toolkit. And now what people do with the toolkit, just like when I first got on the internet, and I remember 1994 hearing the word email for the first time, and I was like, what the fuck is that? And you go from what's that to my business is almost entirely online, to most of the things that I purchase are online, especially now in the middle of pandemic. It's like most of my social interactions are online. Like, I could never have predicted that that's where this is going to go as bandwidth gets bigger and bigger, as network effects, take, and more people are on it. Absolutely crazy. And so now it becomes a question of what is the sort of underlying thing that makes this all magical? The whole notion of distributed technology. Like, what does it mean to be decentralized?
Mm-hmm. The whole idea around decentralization is essentially no one person or organization controls the system. That's it, right? If you think of centralization, it's important to kind of recognize, why is centralization important, or why has it been effective, right? If Amazon wants to be built, or we want to accomplish a lot of the things that have been great throughout this industrial revolution, we needed central order or central kind of coordination of resources, both financial capital, human capital, and also plans and execution. And so these centralized entities end up being built into hierarchical structures. There's somebody or a group of people at the top, and they basically are able to, kind of decree down to the rest of the company. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's what we're not going to work on. And that's basically what the corporate world is as we know it, right? Jeff Bezos got immense leverage with Amazon because he had human capital and financial capital in a hierarchical centralized structure. That's actually a good thing. We would not have Amazon without it, right? Amazon has actually been a huge net positive for the world, in my opinion. Name every other tech company, same thing, right? They're all centralized hierarchical structures. Now what we're getting, though, is a technology change that allows for the coordination of resources that doesn't require the hierarchical structure. Instead of one person making the decisions, what if everyone gets to make the decision? Well, it depends. What are you trying to accomplish? Sometimes decentralization's better. Sometimes it's not, right? There's a very strong argument that in certain situations, centralization is the more efficient, better kind of structure. But now that we have decentralization with this technology, what you do is you can actually build much larger networks. So the difference between a hierarchical structure of, let's say, Amazon that is trying to build out all of these super kind of moonshot type ideas, AWS and logistics and all of this, compared to maybe something where a network ends up making much more sense, right? So take Bitcoin. Well, there's miners, there's node operators, and there's holders. Those are three different groups. And the miners are financially incentivized to run computers to run the network. It's pretty interesting. There's a financial incentive for people all around the world. And there's literally millions and millions of machines around the world that are all doing this. It's the strongest computing network in the world.
Why?
Because every 10 minutes or so, there is a certain amount of Bitcoin, 6.25 Bitcoin, that ends up actually being given out to folks that are running that network, to the people who are running the Bitcoin blockchain. And so that financial incentive right now ends up being somewhere $45-50 million a day in Bitcoin ends up being given out to these people based on how much computing power and some nuance there. So when you create a network that doesn't have a hierarchical structure, there's no CEO of Bitcoin, there's no marketing department, there was no here's the master plan. Okay, Tom, you go build the site in Washington State, and Larry, you go build the site in China, and Mark, you go build the one in Texas. There was none of that. It was purely Tom says, you know what? I want my piece of the Bitcoin block reward every day. And we know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go figure it out. I'm going to go get energy or power. I'm going to buy these machines, and then I'm going to run this, and I'm going to have a profitable business. And so rather than rely on that hierarchical structure, by creating a network, we created the strongest computer network in the world in 12 years.
And is it strong because you can't break it? There's no point of failure. I can't go hack Timmy. I can't seduce somebody and get their keys to something. And is that what makes it strong? Just that there would be so many people to go after?
I think of strength of a network in two ways, specifically around, let's say, Bitcoin. One is just a pure qualitative metric, a qualitative metric, and then one is a quantitative one. The quantitative one's real easy. How much hash rate or how much computing power is actually running this network? And that's can stop a brute force attack or anything like that. And so the Bitcoin network has more computing power running it than anything else, right? And it's way bigger than any of the largest computers in the world, et cetera. So that's a quantitative metric. The qualitative one, I think, more is structurally, right? So from a structure standpoint, if you think about other technology networks that have been shut down, right? Napster is always like a really easy one. Peer-to-peer file sharing was a great idea. People were doing it, obviously. The music industry didn't like it. How do they shut it down? Well, you can basically go and find out who's the CEO of the business, where is the business, where are their servers, all this type of stuff, and you can go ahead and you can shut it down. And so when you remove that hierarchical structure and you now have a decentralized structure, the strength comes from there is no single point of failure. So you have a quantitative metric and you have a qualitative kind of framework. The qualitative one is the design of Bitcoin itself and that network. The quantitative one is just the financial incentives or the economic incentives at play has drastically outperformed any hierarchical effort. And so when you start to look at that, you say, okay, that's interesting. Where else is decentralization important? And what you find is, and I think the industry is learning this right now, is in some cases, decentralization is really, really important, right? We don't want anyone to control this. We don't want anyone to be able to create more of it. We don't want anyone to be able to censor it or shut it down or whatever. Very important. But there's also a lot of people who said, oh, we're going to take those same ideas and we're going to apply it to traditional technology, database technology or whatever. And what you find is in many cases on that front, people, the end user doesn't care if it's decentralized or not, right? They just say, hey, look, I need something that's fast, it's cheap, it's easy to use, whatever. And so I think we're watching this in real time play out. Some things that are decentralized don't need to be. Some things that are centralized need to be decentralized, right? So I think that's ultimately one of the most interesting parts of this industry moving forward is just what ends up getting decentralized and what is actually better off being centralized. And the market's going to decide, right? Like one of the things I think through my career from an investing standpoint is when you're a little bit younger and you're just starting out, you want to be very much of a, I call it like a market predictor, right? I saw A, B, and C, and so that means D, E, and F is going to happen. Maybe. Right? Almost like the younger, the more naive and the more arrogant you are, like the more you have confidence that that's going to happen. As I've gotten older and just gotten more experiences, I don't want to be a market predictor. I want to be a market observer. Just tell me what the market's doing, and then I want to go. Your
goal is to react fast.
It react fast, but also what you can see is the market is the ultimate referee, right? Is Bitcoin valuable? I have a personal opinion. You have a personal opinion. So does millions of other people. No one's individual opinion matters. The collective opinion of the market matters.
Peak Tea is your daily antioxidant powerhouse. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of gut health for your overall health, immunity, and energy level, and basically every other function in your body. My wife Lisa is fanatical about her gut health, and we're always looking for ideas to help. Fermented tea can be incredibly helpful for gut health. That's why you have to check out Peak Tea's fermented pu'er tea. Peak Tea's fermented pu'er tea is wild harvested from rare 250-year-old tea trees and naturally fermented with prebiotics, probiotics, and antioxidants to nourish a healthy gut microbiome. And it's a great kombucha alternative without the sugar, flavorings, or artificial sweeteners. One of our Impact Theory team members has tried Peak Tea, and he especially likes the pu'er green. The flavor is fantastic, and it's become part of his breakfast routine. It's also a great way for him to naturally stay focused and calm during a busy day. Peak's fermented pu'er is more powerful and concentrated in antioxidants than any other type of tea. Pu'er green tea is the holy grail of tea to support a healthy immune system, cellular health, sustained energy, and focus. And the pu'er black tea is fully fermented to support healthy digestion and healthy weight management. Peak's cold extraction technology preserves antioxidants at maximum potential, and it's triple toxin screened for contaminants commonly found in tea. Peak's revolutionary tea crystals dissolve in seconds using cold or hot water with zero prep or brewing required. And their tea packets fit right in your pocket, so they're the perfect fit if you're on the go. Go to peaktea.com/impact and use code IMPACT at checkout. You'll get 5% off your first order. Free shipping, and that's PIQUETEA.com/impact. There's a reason that Peak has over 15,000 five-star reviews. Try it for yourself risk-free with their 30-day satisfaction guarantee. You'll either love it or get your money back. With over 20 delicious award-winning flavors, you are sure to find the one you love. That's peaktea.com, again spelled PIQUETEA.com/impact. You'll get 5% off your first order. And use code IMPACT at checkout to get free shipping. Enjoy the episode.
When you look at, let's say, Bitcoin, for example, I could talk to somebody all day long and they could tell me Bitcoin's not valuable. The best retort to that is it's $1 trillion asset that has tens of millions of people around the world holding it, and it does more transaction volume than some of the card networks. Sure, maybe it's not valuable, right? But like
probably nothing.
Yeah, but the market has determined that that is valuable. And you just work your way through the assets, and what you find is asset after asset that some group of people think isn't valuable. Well, the market's decided it has value. Now, you could argue that the market is wrong or mispricing it or whatever, and there's arbitrage opportunities, etc. But ultimately, I think that we're really bad at predicting the future. And so the more that you can be a market observer rather than a market predictor, you start to just understand crazy stuff happens.
I want to really differentiate between the two. So if I'm a market predictor, I'm trying to say because of ABC, then D, E, and F are going to happen. As a market observer, I'm just saying D is happening right now. And so therefore I know what to do in this moment based on the fact that D is happening. And if, Q starts happening, then I'm going to go and adjust my strategy based on Q.
I'll give you a perfect example. So I do a lot of early stage investing, right? And when I'm looking at early stage opportunities, there's two different types of investors. Some investors look at a business and they say, okay, you want to build, a company that builds some kind of widget. I think that widget market is going to grow bigger. I think that you should do A, B, and C. I think, right? And they come at it very much from here is how I see this happening, and therefore I'm going to make my investment decision on whether your plans line up with how I think the world is going to move in the future. That is a market predictor. You're predicating the investment decision on the prediction of what you think is going to happen in the future. And I did a lot of that early on. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. Over time, what I became is a market observer. Is this person intelligent? Do they know how to solve problems? Are they a clear thinker? Do they think from first principles? Do they have traction in what they're building, regardless of whether I think it's a thing or not, right? There's a lot of people using it. And so what you start to do is you start to become more of an observer. And it grounds you much more in like humility from an investing standpoint of saying, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Could be bullish, could be bearish, could be somewhere in between. But what I do want to see is I want to see the trends. Things that are in motion stay in motion. And so if there's tons and tons of users flocking to something, who cares what my opinion of the future is, right? There's plenty of companies that I think were really stupid. Like imagine when somebody came in and said, hey, we're going to create a company and we have air mattresses in our kitchen and people are paying us to stay there. And we think everyone in the world is going to have an air mattress in their kitchen. A lot of people are like, that sounds insane. Like that's never going to happen. Because what are they doing? They're being a market predictor. But also along with that pitch was, by the way, there was a conference this weekend. And at that conference, we had 6 people, pay us to do it. And so people are doing it. If you're more from a market observer, oh, that's interesting. Did you do it another weekend? Right? The questions you ask are different. It's less about where's the world going, and it's more about show me that the observations that I have available to me today that this is working or that there's something here.
Yeah, in the NFT market, you see that in a big way. Do you mess around with NFTs at all?
I was very, very early to NFTs, and it's not very popular in some sectors of this industry, specifically with Bitcoin maximalists, et cetera. And it's why I make such a serious delineation between monetary maximalism and then like the technology competition. But in May of 2020 or so, I started to hear about it, look at it. It was interesting to me, etc. And the more that I dug into it, I realized I was like, this is the same argument as to Bitcoin versus gold, right? The digital version of something is always bigger than the analog version, right? So the physical version.
Is that just your gut says, or is there...
Name one asset that you can think of where the physical version is not bigger than the digital version.
I can't. And you have just put words to something that I feel, but have never had words. That feels so true to me. That's why I'm so hyped about Bitcoin and Ethereum and NFTs is like, dude, my brain switched over to digital so fast on artwork. I can't tell you. So there was actually, I found myself, somebody wanted to, send me something and they were like, oh, I want to send you, I forget what it was, a painting or something like that. And I, in my heart was like, oh man, if it was an NFT, I would fucking love it. But I'm like, the physical thing, thank you. That's so sweet. It's, oh my God, so kind. But go ahead and keep it. It's weird how fast that happened.
The thing, if you just go down the line, so the easy examples are shopping, all that type of stuff. Taxis, Uber. The reason why most investors missed Uber as an investment opportunity is they compared Uber to the total addressable market of the taxi industry. Well, that was actually the wrong analysis.
That's really interesting.
Because the digital version of taxis ended up actually not owning any cars. And it was a market expanding technology because it didn't just eat taxis. It didn't just eat black cars. There are millions of people in the United States who are young, who don't own a car, and they Uber everywhere. How many people in Manhattan own a car? Well, most of the young people, they just Uber everywhere or they use public transportation, right? And so what ends up happening is the opportunity or the addressable market expanded drastically with a digital version of the analog. If you look at gold's market cap's about 10 trillion. Bitcoin today is 1 trillion. I fully believe that Bitcoin is not only going to drastically eclipse gold's market cap, but it'll be a market expanding technology. If you ask me right now how to go buy gold, I couldn't tell you.
Agreed.
I'd have to call a broker or go on a website or, you know, and have to figure it out. I don't know how to do that. Myself and most digital natives know exactly how to buy Bitcoin. And so you look at that, now bring it to art. The art market, you know, depending on how you count or whatever, $1 trillion or less, right? The digital art market, you just said it. OpenSea did $3 billion in transaction volume in a single month.
It's crazy.
And so why is Bitcoin better as a global store of value than gold? Why is the digital version better than the analog? Well, one, there is a digital component to it, meaning that anyone in the world with an internet connection can sign in and immediately start to transact in it. So there's an accessibility advantage. Two is there's fractionalization. I don't have to buy a full Bitcoin at $45,000, $50,000. I can buy a piece of a Bitcoin. Three is that I can carry it around really simply on my phone, right, or on my laptop rather than lugging around physical gold. So there's a portability advantage to it. And then you start to look at it from a storage cost, etc. Right? There's a whole bunch of advantages, digital version versus the physical version. What happens with the digital art? It's the same thing. More accessible, more divisible, more portable, all this type of stuff. And so if we're going to go and move our lives into this like metaverse digital world, whatever, you know, is the new way to describe it, why would we leave the assets we care about in the analog world? No, we're going to bring them into the digital world too.
All right, I'm going to try to touch on something ephemeral to just drive this point home. Have you ever looked at a VV Vault?
VV Vault? No,
Yeah.
What is that?
Okay, this is so crazy. So VV is a collectibles company that's partnered with like DC, Marvel to do, but their NFTs look like actual collectibles. So it looks like a toy, it looks like a statue, like they're going out of their way to sort of literally just digitize the collectibles industry. But their brilliant move, and I'm still dazzled by this, is that they gave their users the ability to create these. They've made it right now. I'm sure future iterations won't, but it looks like a vault. So you're going through a vault door and then you're on the inside, but it's just a virtual space for you to display all the things you've collected. The level of creativity that people show in placing their items is insane. So I'll give you one example. The way that they have programmed this space. So one of the collectibles you can buy is the DeLorean from Back to the Future. And one guy put it upside down and on the roof. So it's actually outside the vault, but it plays an animation in a loop of the flux capacitor turning on, which has all this electricity, right? If you remember the movie, all the electricity sparks and then it disappears. So it does that animation. So as you walk through this guy's vault every 30 seconds, whatever, all this electricity just runs around the ceiling because he's placed his collectible. And I was like, oh my God, if I have the physical thing, you have to come into my house to see the physical collectible. B, it's not going to have electricity sparking everywhere. It's going to zap some kid walking by. So not only now am I only bridled by my imagination, but anyone, anywhere can come and see this. And so now as a social creature that wants to connect with my community, and I'm given these virtual tools, I don't need to be wealthy, right? You no longer need a big crazy house to display all of this art. You can create this virtual thing, put all your stuff in a way that only you have done. It takes time, right? You talk about money as this equation to time. So we know we value time. So when I see somebody who's spent their time creating something like this, I'm just like, oh my God, like this is so much cooler than what collectibles have ever been ever before in history. And so I start thinking about, all right, now you're going to have companies that spring up that are making virtual galleries where the gallery itself is like this crazy physics defying piece of art. And you're not just walking through a mimicry of a traditional gallery. You're on the fucking moon. You're in outer space. You're inside the body, whatever you want. Like it is the creativity that the digital realm unleashes because you no longer have to obey the laws of physics. It's just, oh my God.
I think there's an element of like, you don't have to obey the laws of physics. You also don't have to ask permission of anybody.
Preach.
right? So, if you go and you look at an art gallery in Manhattan, for example, how many people really got an opportunity to design the art gallery? Well, they're usually people who have some sort of pedigree. They got trained somewhere, right? There's like all these like hurdles to get in. And so it ends up being a lot of the same people who all know each other, and they're the ones who do it. On the internet, imagine if you held a global competition for whoever could create the best art gallery, right? And there was like a prize for it. You'd get some really, really cool stuff because there was no barriers to become the person who could do that. That's all this is it's now just saying, but you don't have to come do it in Manhattan, like just do it on the internet. And I think that, the best analogy I have for this is think of Twitter. If I said to you, Tom, you know what you're going to do every day? You're going to go hang out in this virtual reality square and you're going to talk to random strangers. You'd be like, dude, that sounds like cool to like test one time, but like I got things to do. But what do? You go through the portal, which is your computer or your phone, and you go and you hang out in a digital square and you talk to strangers. Like that is in some weird way a version of virtual reality, right? I tweeted recently, I said, we live in virtual reality already. It doesn't look like the thing that you put, the Oculus headset on and you walk around, you can touch and feel things. And like that's like level, 2, 3, 4, 5 of virtual reality. But Twitter created virtual reality for people and you can go there and hey, every day we all come here and meet up again. Right? And you keep going. And then what am I basically doing? I'm basically walking around the square and I'm saying, okay, Tom's talking about this person's talking about this person's talking about this. And I have a choice. Do I want to button the conversation? Do I want to reply? Do I want to quote tweet? Do I want to say, hey, Tom just said whatever, and I go and tell my friends? That's a retweet button. Like you start to think through this and it's like, yeah, this is all going to happen. How quickly does that happen? Up for debate. What technologies is it built on? Up for debate. How should an investor invest? Up for debate. How should you as a market participant who's not an investor but wants to be a user, how should you use this stuff? Up for debate. But I think that one of the trends that every great investor has figured out, or one of the activities, is just find that kind of direction that the world is moving, as be an observer, understand the world's moving this way, and then go and say, okay, well, what are people using?
To your point about observing it, to not judge it. So one of the things that the NFT market has taught me is that, in fact, I wrote my rules. They were tongue in cheek when I wrote them, but I think I should publish them, is that everything you think is cool is going to go to zero, and everything that you think is dumb is going to moon. And I've just seen that play out over and over and over again. It's really hard to predict what other people are going to think is cool because it's really a moment is created. Energy is orchestrated somehow through this. It's not an invisible hand because there are some people that are really good at it, but they can get the energy moving towards a project for whatever reason. Like, I don't know if you paid attention to what happened with Loot. So the guy that I consider my king of alpha, David, he sent me a tweet. Like I was about to go to bed and he was like, hey, Tom, this thing called Loot is popping off. Look at it. I looked at it and I'm like, this is white words on a black background. This doesn't make any sense. And I was like, but I know this industry. And if people believe that this is like new, fresh, exciting, that at least for a moment, there's going to be this influx of attention. Now, that moment could be 10 years. That moment could be 10 minutes. I have no idea. But I'm getting better and better at sort of arbitraging some of these things. So I bought 2 of them. And then a couple days later, if you owned them, you got an airdrop of basically their token. And I didn't even know about the airdrop. And the same guy, David, was like, hey, Tom, because you bought 2, you've been airdropped this stuff, but you actually have to go pull it out of the contract directly. And so I'll show you how to do it. So here you go into Etherscan, and this is how you do it. And I got it, and I got my 2 bags of gold. And as of that day, that thing, so I bought the ones that I bought, I think I bought it, I can't remember if it was 1.9 ETH for the original Loots or 0.9, but it was in there somewhere. And at the time I got the gold, which remember, I didn't even know existed. I was already making money hand over fist just on the actual squares that I bought. And the bags of their coin that my friend had to tell me were there, I went and sold one of the 2 for $50,000. And I was like, I imagine if a friend was like, hey, dude, I know you don't know, but in your bread box in the back cupboard, a guy just left you 50 grand. You'd be like, what just happened? It was so surreal. And I was just like, okay, don't think about things. Think about the nature of things. And I was like, this is telling me something about the nature of humans, of creative energy, of attention, and how it can be swayed, about enthusiasm, and how it moves sort of restlessly. It never lands on one thing and stays. And so there's these really predictable curves that these projects go through. And I'm like, hold on. If you do your, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hours of research and you like really figure this game out, obviously never invest a single dime over what you're prepared to lose, because NFTs are the single highest risk investment I've ever seen humanity come up with. I want to make that really fucking clear. But it is so interesting to see how it captures that same part of the psyche around sports betting, how we're all locked up because of what's going on with COVID. Like there's all these factors that have come into play, and just that crypto's taking off and NFTs have answered the question of whether there's a real thing there and whether people will value them. But once I stopped judging the market and just started saying, this is happening, whether I think it should or not, whether I think white text on a black background should be cool or not, it is. And it's capturing energy. And dude, it wasn't long ago that I made $50,000 a year. So I was like, this is so crazy. And this comes back to like my obsession. People need to do their own research. I cannot predict the future. You cannot predict the future. Who knows? This could all go to nothing tomorrow. That does not seem likely. And given what's going on today, the nature of the technology, right? Understand it, think from first principles, and it becomes far easier to do novel things. But just looking at what's going on, I legitimately want to, with all the caveats of you have to be so careful. You cannot go blindly into this. But I can think of few things that are worth people's time and energy to understand more than the blockchain. And that, if this were a baseball game, we are still in the locker room getting ready to come out onto the field. It's like, because I mean that from a technology standpoint, like even forget just that you could buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever today and it will go up in value. What's going to be built on the back of the technology will create a world that will be as unrecognizable as a post-internet world would have been to me in 93 before I'd even heard of email to now. I mean, that's utterly just, it's a transformation that I could never have predicted. It's going to be the same thing. But this one's happening in full view because we already have the internet. So it's already, you and I are talking right now to, hopefully millions of people. And then on top of that, we've all seen it happen before. So you can say, hey guys, remember mobile phones? Hey guys, remember the internet? This is a big one like that. And so I think this is going to be, I'm going to make a statement and you're going to say whether I'm a fool or not. I think this will be the biggest wealth transfer ever that we've ever seen, like robber baron moment type wealth transfer. But it's not going to go to a really, really small number of people. It's going to go to whoever the fuck takes the time to learn about this and go, there's some percentage of my daily income. It doesn't it will go to people who don't even think in net worth terms yet. Because this is, as Raul Paul said, this is the first time in human history where the average person has been able to front run the institutions. So this is a chance for people to get $10 every paycheck, whatever, but like to get in. And now whether it just becomes sort of wealth redistributed, because so many, like the older and more established your wealth, the less likely you are to move on this quickly.
Well, you got to think too, from an investing standpoint, you've got to ask yourself, like, who are you, right? Like, what type of investor do you want to be? There's some investors who are the most risk-averse people in the world. They say, I don't want to take any risk. I'm already wealthy in many cases. I want to protect. I'm in capital preservation mode. There's a lot of people who say, no, I'm in capital accumulation mode, right? I want to go make money. I need to make money. And what you need to seek out then in most cases is asymmetry. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do, I have these like 5 principles, right? From a personal investing standpoint. You need to spend less than you make, like kind of a core principle, right? Kind of get out of debt if you're in debt. The third thing is that you have to get out of cash and you have to invest in assets. Doesn't really matter what assets, as much more so as the action of investing. You got to be super, super, super patient, right? And you got to be disciplined. And that's it. And if you do that for long periods of time, like you will make money. And the reason is because the currency underlying it all is going to be devalued. So all of these asset prices continue to go up. Stock market, every single day it seems like it hits a new all-time high, right? It just continues to go up and up and up. But that's if you're super risk averse and you say, hey, I'm just going to buy a low-cost index fund, S&P 500, whatever. There are some people who want to take more risk and they want to look for more asymmetry. But I think that the NFT stuff, etc., is fascinating because there is a level of wealth that is being created, but it's not being exchanged. And so this is something that I think a lot of people, when they think about, oh, there was $3 billion that was put through a system, or that person is worth $1 billion and they made it in crypto. In many cases, what happened is not that somebody gave $1 billion of fiat currency and received $1 billion worth of digital tokens. Instead, what happened is somebody created it out of thin air. And so now all of a sudden you have all these tokens that are worth a penny, and they start trading, and one trades at 2 pennies. And next you know, now that market cap of the asset is now 2x, right? It's no different than companies. So for example, when Jeff Bezos starts Amazon, right? He says, hey, my company is worth X dollars. You can buy shares at, Y price. Okay. As the company accrues value based on all these valuation metrics that people have, eventually the company is worth, $1 trillion. And you're like, well, did $1 trillion get paid to you? No, I don't think Amazon's ever made $1 trillion in cash, but the equity value, which has accrued value over time, ends up being a really big opportunity. And so it's fascinating for me to watch people like, take a Jay-Z as kind of the quintessential